Preston here. I think the most important thing about where I am right now is that I have finally accepted that the work that I'm doing is for me, and it that has to be the most important thing. Yeah. Um, I think we all get so focused on making it early on. It's like, oh, like, will this will this entity that can validate me like it, or will like, if I don't adhere to like this new aspect of the meta, will I be preventing myself from blowing up? But it's just like, if you, I think you that is a path to a lot of self torture that makes doing it just not worth it. So.
What kind of struggles have you faced in that regard?
Like, I think right out of college, we all what is kind of like the what is kind of the film student's fantasy. The film student's fantasy is just like, oh, I'm gonna do my NYU short. I'm gonna win the Wasserman. I'm gonna get into Sundance. I'm gonna get into Cannes. I'm gonna win the award there. I'm gonna get noticed. I'm gonna get an agent, and I'm gonna get repped. And then people will want the feature version of this short, and then that movie will happen. It will be a hit, and then from there on, people will give me stuff. I think everyone's always looking for that one moment where it just where you get over the hill and everything else is just like pure and raw momentum and it's easy for you, and I just don't think that ever happens. The business is always looking for the hottest new talent, and they're hoping to attach themselves to them before they blow up, and so that they can become as popular and as profitable as possible. And we, as really really vulnerable young creative people, it's like we look for authority figures to validate our work and to say, it's like, oh, now you're real. And it's like, I remember it happened a little bit later for me than a lot of other people, but I was really lucky, and people invited me out to China to do to do this like 12 episode series. It was 12 half-hour episodes, and it was like pretty big for the time. It was like a $3 million production, and like at the time it seemed like a Chinese US collaborative co-productions were going to be the biggest thing. And so I got repped at a talent agency, and they were like sending me out to like all the majors to take meetings. At the time, I was almost afraid to tell people that I was writing and directing, because none of them took me, you know. And I was and it would be like, you would take these meetings and they tell you what they wanted, and then they'd have you look at stuff, and they'd be like, oh, I like that idea, why don't you give me more of that? And then none of them will ever get picked, and you're like, oh, why isn't it good enough, or whatever. And then you start spiraling into, it's like, oh, well, what are the things I need to change about myself for them to take me? I think that is a path that leads to diluting anything about you that was ever special, and then also what the point of doing it is. That's the kind of long round the block point I was trying to get at.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and then 2 years ago, it all just fucking went away. It's like, unless somebody is unless you guys have history, unless you're a very good friend, it's like people with whom you only have some kind of a business relationship, they were gone. And no matter who you are, that can happen to you anytime. It's like, I'm sure people who worked with George Lucas in the 80s and thought he was the man, I'm sure he doesn't hear from them after he did Attack of the Clones. It's like it doesn't matter how big you get, people can walk away at any time, and that's I think we have been afforded a really early opportunity to experience that. I'm trying to think of, like, no matter like any project I'm doing, it's like I want to have the kind of home video collaborative and neighborhood centric approach to anything I'm doing from now on, instead of trying to vie to be invited to be a part of the machine.
Can you remember a time when you felt completely free creatively before all this happened?
I don't think so. I think that's a really big, it's been a really big problem for me doing movies all the way up until this point, is that, like, even when I was a kid, it would be like, oh, we're gonna go with the camcorder and we're gonna come up with something, and it would be like somebody in our little crew, they'd be like, oh, I want to do something like this, and then I'd be like, oh, he wants this. and then we would find the best way to do it. And I always kind of like attached my best work towards the expectations of somebody else or like a collaborator or something like this. And I think that a lot of the times people do this so that uh, they can protect themselves from the fear of doing bad work. Because it's like, oh, if someone really wants something, then it's not just for you. You know, like you kind of have a shield from responsibility for the work, and it seems like you're being really self-sacrificing, but really there's a kind of a selfish and unfilmmakerly aspect to that I'm like, if you think that something's good, you should be willing to be the one name that stands behind it.
Yeah, it's almost like playing it safe.
Yes, exactly. It prevents you from being a master of your own fate, and uh, if you don't choose the kind of person you want to be, someone else always will choose for you, and so that's like a something that's very precious to me right now. Yeah.
Yeah, that can be a tough feeling too, feeling like you're
Yeah.
tied to someone or like you have to wait
Yes.
around for like, oh, they said this was going to happen and then.
Yes.
So do you feel like you've kind of made a change in your outlook recently?
Oh yes, I think so. And you've worked on this movie with me. It's like this is the first project that I can remember that I did just for me, and that's a muscle I think that I want to continue to exercise and develop, and that's where I hope my best work will come from. Yeah.
What's inspirational to you or fun to you about kung fu movies?
Like people look at right now, like all of the most popular movies are superhero movies, and like there is an escapist fantasy that people just flock to the theaters to go see. But I think that the thing that people have always loved about kung fu movies is that they sell to you a human superpower that is at least partially attainable in the real world. And so it's like I think people fantasize about this human superpower. When I first came to film school, I was on the NYU Taekwondo team because that was the only competitive martial arts team that they had. Maybe the wrestling team competes, but in my mind at the time it wasn't like wrestling. Yeah. And then that kind of led me down this really weird rabbit hole. When I was started watching a lot of Olympic Taekwondo, there was some stuff that like really interested me. It's like, of course, Taekwondo comes from Korea, but then I was like, a lot of the athletes that I like to watch the most, I'm like, wow, like why is like Turkey or Mexico win gold at Taekwondo like every year and not South Korea? And then that's the thing I started thinking a lot about. It is like, if you're someone from a completely different country, what are the things that attract you to like a very, very an unusual Asian martial art? Yeah, that's something I think about a lot. RZA talks about how he and so many people he grew up with were so attracted to kung fu movies, and specifically movies from I think mostly they would be 70s movies, but like Shaw Brothers 70s period kung fu movies. And it's like, oh, he's like, oh, why are, even though we're not Chinese, why are we so into the fantasy of martial arts? But it's just kind of like I said, he talked about, it's like if you watch like 36 Chamber of Shaolin, it's about a young educated man whose family have been murdered for speaking out against a corrupt and imperial force, like a military government forces, and then he gains the strength by which to fight back and to organize followers who also seek to fight back. And he's like, the fantasy to gain human superpower by which you can become a master of your own fate and fight back against your oppressor is a universal thing, or it's universal to people who feel like they are being oppressed within a system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I do see this a lot. It's like I see people who are interested in unusual martial arts. There's a lot of times there's an element of whether they realize it or not, they want to escape to a fantasy of being able to, like, you know, it's like not so literally, but it's like, oh, like I could break out of this human reality if I could like train kung fu hard enough to fly, or to kill you in three finger pokes or something like this. It's like,
That seems like
yeah.
kind of one of those universal human desires is like to transcend.
Yes. Yes.
How do you feel about that theme?
Oh, I'm super into it. And I try because I'm so into the martial arts genre. Like I am into seeing this uh, in stories that aren't about martial arts at all. And also, there's a lot of martial arts movies that I've watched where the crucial theme is transcending, but there is a mental or emotional transcending that is related to each of the characters that is not even necessarily related to just to a martial arts technique. And you can kind of see where I'm going with this, where it's like a lot of the appeal in it is not just it's like, oh, I could jump this much higher today, or I could do this weird move. It's like it's the experience of transformation, regardless of what form it comes in.
Hmm.
Yeah.
What do you feel like you've gained from martial arts, kung fu movies that those morals, I guess, or themes
Oh
that?
well, as a filmmaker, it's helped me a lot whenever I have to think about what we do to get it done. It gets me out of crazy, fearful mode a lot more to pretend it's a sport or to think of it as athletics. And I've talked to this to other filmmakers too, who it's like it's not just martial arts stuff. It's like I'm sure with a lot of people that you've interviewed, a lot of them like they like to run or they like to do marathons, and it's like I do see this in the other filmmakers I talk to. It's like the act of training for a marathon or participating in other sports that require a lot of dedication and discipline. It's like I just need to go and run those 3 miles today, and in 2 months it'll feel like nothing to me. It'll feel like breathing air. Thinking about aspects of the creative process as like an athletic process definitely helps you to get the reps in and to ground the work in a way that you're not afraid of it. Yeah.
Do you have a particular structure that you approach your work with, as far as structuring it as training?
I know, especially early on when I was younger, and it was like I had to fight somebody or I had to compete against them. It would just be the fucking scariest thing. And like you go into the ring and you're gonna do some stuff, and then like you can't like feel your hands or your feet, and it's like what you want to do. It just doesn't seem like your body will listen to you and this type of stuff. And then you're like, oh my god, how will I ever make this work? And that feeling never goes away, but you learn not to be afraid of your body's natural instinct to be afraid for you, and you accept the discomfort as part of the process. I feel like that's a lot like the first couple of times I tried to do, especially with like crews and lights and like thousands of dollars on the line when we were doing stuff in film school. It's like, oh my god, how are we gonna do this? How are we gonna do this? How are we gonna do this? Like the day before you roll. I remember in film school, it's like if you were gonna right before you were gonna do a big project, it feels like you the night before you want. It's like how can I just run away from this right now? But then now after doing it so many times, like you still feel that way, but you're just not afraid to feel worried it's gonna all go to hell anymore. And there are little things about this that I seek to like condition myself uh, through repetition to handle better.
Yeah, it's almost like you get used to the discomfort. You don't expect the discomfort to go away anymore.
Yes.
It's like you almost embrace it at a certain point.
Yeah.
What are you excited for coming up?
In the past, I think I used to like to a fault. I would be like, okay, so I have this new project, and this is the genre, and then I would just look at the best movies in that genre, and I would just try to do that because that's another thing that protects yourself from having to answer for whether it's good or bad. And I think that with this one that the inspiration is the kung fu movies that I like to watch the most when I was a kid, but I've gone in and changed things where I want to, and there are other things in it that diverge just from this straightforward like in a kung fu movie these things happen. I've been much more willing this time around to take the formula and change it into what I want it to be, and that's been very exciting. And the thing I've been thinking a lot about is like, I really hope that I will be able to do this regardless of what the story is or what the genre is, whatever I do next, I want to be able to do this as well, where I'm not just like, oh, it's like it's a movie like this. I guess I should just these couple things tend to happen. I'll just copy those, and I really hope to be able to maintain this kind of like genre mix and match, kind of like flow state improvising that makes it weirder and just a little bit more spontaneous than what I was doing before. Yeah.
Because I feel like that's when the personality really comes in and like
Yeah.
your actual.
Yeah.
Do you notice a big difference in your mindset when you're doing something that way?
Oh yeah, it's just the work feels easier and it's more rewarding. Like I remember in the past if I was writing like a spec half hour or something like that, and I was like, oh, they have to say something funny here, and then like to like look up the pilot for like Community or something like this and be like, oh my god, well why doesn't my quip snap like theirs, and then just to try to hit that, it's just like it's excruciating. And when instead I'm just like, oh, like, well, what do I think is funny? Letting that happen naturally, it first of all doesn't hurt, and then it's funnier to me. I whether or not I'm funnier than the other writer, which even if I'm not as funny, the joke is different. The joke is different. It has honesty, in a way that I think people will be able to sense. Yeah.
And I think, like you're saying too, it's like you feel better about it in the end
Yes.
too.
Yes.
Because it's not like, oh, I miscalculated. It's
Yeah.
like, well, I did what I thought was good.
Yes.
And people just didn't respond, or they did, you know?
Yes. Because yeah, when you just copy people, then you risk people not liking it, and you also risk that you not liking it, and it's like, and people who don't like it, you can hide from them. You can like not go online, and you can not show your work to people, but you can't hide from yourself. So it's like if you wrote a joke and you hated it, you'll go to sleep and you're like, oh fuck, I'm still me. I know I did that. It's so bad. I can't take a vacation from me. So that's that's the thing. This is a really big part of what I mean by making sure that the work is for you. The first audience member is you. It's just like, unfortunately, the nature of being a human being, with a supercomputer that doesn't turn off inside of you, is just like, anything that you do that you regret is just gonna be with you forever. So why do that? Yeah.
It's a good way to think about it.
Well, I think too much and drive myself crazy. So I'm trying to come up with all the antidotes for for this shit.
What have you found that has helped you?
I try to avoid having to go down paths where I just know that I'll have to give up a ton of dignity, and do or say a lot of artistically disingenuous things in order to be considered in the room. Making that a huge priority, is definitely, it's a huge mental health plus. Yeah. Most people never even make it to self-actualizing when it comes to their creativity. And that's something I think about all the time. Talent, work, and the road that it takes to self-actualize your potential as a creative, regardless of what medium you're working in.
What do you think that means to become self-actualized?
There are some people who work really, 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 really hard, and they might not have a ton of talent, but they will, because of the work, they will reach their potential. The likelihood that they will reach the potential is much higher. And then there are people who are really, really talented who don't have any discipline, and even if they have unimaginable talent, they might never realize even a fraction of that potential if they don't have that work mindset. And a lot of the times, I feel like the talent can undermine work ethic, and but also a fixation just on work ethic can undermine talent. And so this is a thing. Like, we all went to film school together. It's like, oh, I think all the time it's like, oh, that person was so good, but maybe they never got there before they hung it up, or right now the way they're doing it, they're not actually doing the thing that will allow them to reach the peak of what they can do or something like that. Or you meet people who are like they're shooting every other week and they bust their ass and they're just like, oh my god, they work so hard, but just so it feels like they don't have it. And I think about this kind of thing all the time. Yeah.
Do you think you need to get to that level of achievement to be happy?
Um, I don't think so. I think it's such an undefinable thing. Like nobody ever knows. Like it's like, oh, this is it. This is the smartest or the most talented or the best I'll ever be. But I think we do all have an inclination towards feeling that we aren't realizing this potential, or that we are actively sabotaging the standard that we want to hold ourselves to. So that's I just want to make sure that in whatever I'm doing, I I don't feel like I am sabotaging what I want the process and my creative lifestyle to be. Yeah.
Is the lifestyle part of it for you, like important to you?
Oh yeah, like I mean, you've seen us around this house is like and this is another big pandemic thing is like people when everything closed down, like a lot of people just started freaking out about like it's like, oh, there's nobody who needs me right now, but and especially us and our roommates, we've kind of been like we've kind of been practicing the sport of not having a boss for like half a decade already, so we were very well equipped to adapt, and we retained our mental health at a much more fortunate day-to-day rhythm than I think a lot of people that I was in touch with were able to. We graduated in 2012. Like for the first 2 years or so, I had like an actual job, and and they were such good people. Like the pay was good for someone who was 22. Like everyone in the work, like people in the office were kind, they were generous, and like it wasn't like the work was miserable. But then like at some point I realized that I was just like, to not leave means just doing this, and then at some point I just had to hang it up, and then for the next couple of years, I had such a hard time. Like I was like, oh, you need to make the time for yourself uh, to invest your best waking energy into your creative endeavors. But then if someone called me and was like, hey, we have a gig, not saying yes would make me go insane. I would feel horrible for not taking the work or anything like this, and if I wasn't working and I at the same time I wasn't writing or shooting full bore, I would be like, I am being a burden to society by not being uh productive right now. And that was like in the next like 3 to 5 years it took to get over that.
What kind of advice do you have for people who are coming down a similar path to you?
I think people have like accused me of giving like conflicting advice to one person, where it's like, what's a good example of this? Where it's like I might tell one person, it's like, oh, you have to be more critical of your work, and then I might tell another person, and it's like, you have to own that you think that your work is great. I think that we all have a tendency to veer towards one extreme or another in our process. And so if you feel like you're losing your way doing what you are doing, usually by defaulting to whichever extreme is natural to your personality, it's like always consider the other extreme that you don't indulge, and that might be like a path to figuring out what you need to be doing to get to the next level, or to get out when you're stuck. People get so winning minded. It's like let's say you're a famous filmmaker and you did like a hit movie. It's like and you're working all the time and they're all hits, but it's like, realistically speaking, the day your movie comes out and is a huge hit, it's only going to be like it's going to be like a night or a window of about a month once every 2 to 4 years. And if you're living miserably in between those very very tiny windows, I just think that's a really I think it's a really toxic and miserable existence if you can't find fulfillment and nourishment in whatever it is that you are seeking through doing it in the actual periods where you are realizing the work, the days when you get the outside validation and all of this sort of stuff, it's just so short. You'll suffer for so many more days than you are rewarded. And so I would say that everybody needs to find their own way to live well and to let the process be the reward that you seek, because then even if you don't get the other reward, you won't live your life as like a twisted and regretful human being, because that's possible even if you're really good, like I said.